Hey folks, Patrick from Portrayal back with you. Have you ever heard the expression, I got a wild hair, and there's the rest of it that since this is a G-rated channel, I'll leave out. Well, I got a wild hair about 10 days ago when somebody called me and said, hey, I know of this Mule project for sale. And so what we're standing in front of is my new Mule project, because I needed another project like I needed a hole in my head. But this is, to the best of what I know at this point, a 1968, 1969 A2. I bought it with pictures, kind of sight unseen. So it was a little rougher when I got it home than I expected. I went and picked it up out in Pennsylvania. But overall, not bad, pretty complete. Seems like it's going to be an okay, quick project. And so today, before we kind of decide what we're going to ultimately do, I want to see if I can get it running. It was supposedly running and driving. So the goal today is to kind of put it back together a little bit here. The gas tank was supposedly cleaned out. So what I'm going to do is run through, make sure all the fluids are correct, take the shrouds out, make sure we don't have any mice nest inside, which is a favorite place for mice to build, and see if we can get this thing running. We'll drive it around a little bit if it does in fact run. And then I think based on that, I'll make a decision about what's next for the Mule project. So let's get going. That should have a bolt down there. We might look in the parts manual in a second and figure out what size it is, but for purposes of trying to get this thing started, I think we're okay. So these are a little beat up and old. Came from a friend of mine who finished this project. This is probably repairable if we wanted to, but there are vendors who sell repro Mule seats, so we'll probably end up just buying new seats for this. I do have an original cover for the back that looks a little better than this one, but at least it looks like a Mule now. The place to start is the motor. And as I mentioned, I looked at this, the carburetor was replaced. It supposedly was running when parked. It hasn't been running in a couple years, so who knows what we're in for here. I've already checked the oil. There's oil in here. It's pretty ugly, but it probably hasn't been changed in a good long while, and I will change it, but I want to see if we can get it running before we do that, because if there's a problem with the motor, we'll end up having to rebuild the motor. So no sense in wasting a couple of quarts of oil to figure that out. The other thing worth noticing, this is some crazy adaptation of a starter here, and they cut part of the deck, which is a pretty inelegant way to do this, but that's what they did. So we'll live with it for the time being. Like I said, part of this is figuring out what we're up against and what we need to be doing to make this a nice Mule. The mice have a crazy habit of building nests inside of this shroud. I don't know why, but they do, with a vengeance. So these are little Zeus fasteners that should pop out here. There we go. So step one, anytime you're dealing with a Mule, that should stay. Move it out of the way a little bit. Is take off the shroud and see what you're up against. So if you look down inside, you see there's some stuff in there, but nothing major. I don't see, usually you see big mouse nests. I'm gonna get an air hose and we'll blow this out real quick just to clean it out and be good. And then I think we need to look at the gas tank and see what we have there. Put a battery on this thing. I know the motor is free. I have turned it over. Not too dirty. We just want to see if this thing, it should turn over just fine, and it does, and it's got good compression. Like I said, I bought this sight unseen. The other thing is this has got a magneto. Now I know it was off, but if it was on, it could kick back and break my hand. So not to you can't ever be too careful when you're coming with these kinds of things. I want to pull the spark plugs out first, actually, before I do that. I'll pull the spark plugs out real quick and just look at them and see what they look like. We may squirt a little PB blaster or something in there and run this thing over a couple times just to lube everything up before it starts. But again, the guy said it's ran 3 years ago, so we'll find out shortly. So spark plugs on this, not super accessible, but not terrible either. So the other thing worth mentioning while we're here, since you're down here looking, A2, the 2-cylinder Mule mufflers are no longer available. Nobody's making them. I was talking to John Emery at Emery Mule Supply a couple days ago, and he's thinking about making them, but apparently the NOS ones are long gone. So if you don't have a muffler for your Mule, you're gonna have to adapt something. I don't know what they did here, and I have no idea whether it's gonna work. I have the correct one on my other A2, so we'll find out if this works well or not. But somebody put something here, so we'll have to stay tuned on that one. People are also saying you can adapt the 4-cylinder motor muffler to the 2-cylinder, but I've heard a bunch of commentary that that's not a good idea because the mufflers, they're really designed for a certain amount of back pressure, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't think anybody's actually done, maybe the guys doing the modifications have done the work to figure out what the right changes are, but I think for the most part they're just bolting on, they're making some slight modifications to make them fit and not changing the internal pressures. So we're not sure. And again, I talked to John Emery about this a little bit. I don't think anybody's for sure that that's a great idea. Maybe somebody who's done that before and has done the work to figure out what the back pressure should be, et cetera, can chime in the comment section and let us know how to do that. So, okay. Coming out, but that is not pretty. Well, it doesn't look that gummed up. I don't know why that was sticking like that. Spark plug looks clean. Slap a little never seize on here and put it back in. Do the other one too. I'm sure all you guys know anti-seize, never seize. This is Permatex's anti-seize lubricant. These spark plugs stick. Put a little never seize on there. I just got a little bit in the threads, and it will prevent this dissimilar metal corrosion and make it not stick. That was what I was feeling. It literally is how you do things like strip spark plug holes in cylinder heads. It happens in modern cars a lot too. So you just need to make sure you use Permatex or a similar brand of anti-seize. And again, most of you guys know this, but you don't want to use a wrench on that. You got to start these things, no matter how hard it is to get your fat fingers in there. You got to start this stuff by hand. I mentioned this is an aircraft motor. Originally, Continental designed this motor. It was built by Hercules, but it was a Continental design, and it's very similar to a bunch of light horsepower motors that are used in some light airplanes. A pretty cool little motor. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning about craftsmanship, and we were laughing a little bit about how slow is often fast, and sometimes it's really frustrating, particularly when you start doing things like trying to video things. It takes forever to get stuff done correctly, and you spend a lot of time shooting and fiddling, and the guys shooting the videos say, man, this is getting boring because all you're doing is taking it off and testing again and fitting it and taking it off and doing some minor tweak and jumping on it and bending. But that's really how this process goes. You have to sort of hold yourself to a nice high standard and do everything you can to the best of your ability, and then you get a great result. Otherwise, you take a shortcut and you come back and you have to do it again, and after a while you look at yourself and say, you know, it would have been a lot easier to do it right the first time. I know your dad probably told you that. I know my dad told me that. I didn't always listen to him, but 54, I'm finally getting it, so. All right, let's check some gas tanks. I'll use my trusty iPhone power light to see how bad this thing looks. The guy claimed he cleaned it out, but who knows? I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, that looks 10 ugly. I am not gonna run that through. So we're going to take the soft fitting off here. I have another hose and another little pony tank that I use to start motors that I'm worried about, like this. We're going to tap into this line right here. So this is not a standard Mule fuel line. Somebody's adapted some of these. I believe they're all steel. But again, we'll check the parts manual later and either bend one up or do something. I'm not sure. This is nothing pretty, and boy is it hard, but it'll work for this purpose. I think we'll be able to just put one on here and get it tight. I had a problem. We were using this on my Jeep when I first got it running, and the hoses are a little larger than this one, so it didn't want to go in. I think what we'll do is hook the battery up and turn it over a little bit, see how it sounds, and then we'll put some gas in it and see if we can get it started up. And if we start it up and it runs all right, then we'll put the shroud back on, put this down some way, and we'll see if we can take it for a test drive, see if the gears work, clutch, et cetera, because who knows what else is wrong with it. I know the parking brake is stuck as well. So, all right, stolen from the other Mule. This is a hell of an operation, isn't it? And this must be a switch. So I think it's got a solenoid on it. So that actually, I think they may have tricked us. That should be the positive there. This other one is going right here. That would be the wonders of redneck mechanicking. I'm a redneck, so I can say that. This is the ground, and this is a negative ground system. So they just had an extra red cable and they mounted it right there, and so it's not so pretty, but we know that's the ground. This is our positive cable here, and not too pretty, so we'll clean that up. So I actually, in addition to this one, I did get an opportunity a couple of days after I bought this one to buy 2 parts mules, and I am trying to get them shipped from the Midwest over here. One of them looks to have a better bed than this one, so anyway, my plan is to sort of mix and match. I also have this wild idea that I would like to build an M274 4-cylinder Mule, which you don't see very many of. The military didn't like the 4-cylinder motor. It had a bunch of problems, so they retrofitted all of the early M274 and 274A1s that were equipped with this Willys 4-cylinder motor, air-cooled, with the 2-cylinder, and that's what your A3 and A4 variants are. So anyway, they're kind of cool, and I know a bunch of people who know the motors real well and claim that you can get them to run reliably. So I'm seriously contemplating going off on the M274 rodeo and try to build a 4-cylinder Mule, take in one of the converted ones and putting it back to 4-cylinder. So I think that's likely to happen. I actually have a line on 2 motors too, so I'm probably going to go ahead and pull the trigger on those. And I think my goal is not to have, so many mules. I'll probably sell this one, assuming that it's a decent mule, without doing too much work to it. And then I'm going to probably end up selling my A2, the nice one, and after I've restored the 4-cylinder and got that thing running correctly. So, all right, let me get a little more clean in here. Fit, sort of, kind of. Now, because this thing has a magneto in it, we're not powering anything but the starter system. So there's really not a lot of things we could do wrong here. This is obviously jumper cables, so we're kind of doing a jump. It's a little bit of a half A jump, but we're going to do it this way. And we'll put this on, and we should now have power to the starter motor. I'm assuming, I don't know how good that's going to connect, but we'll see. We'll leave that for the time being. This thing, when we touch it, should hit the starter. There's a push button. This is hooked to a solenoid, so this is basically the same way any car starter circuit works. The solenoid gets energized. It's out of gear. The starter switch is in the front. There's a little button here. We rolled this before. So the starter switch they wired here, so let's see if we got a live starter. Nope. There's the push button. I could have this backwards actually as I think about this. Let's try it the other way. Maybe it is a ground. Maybe it's going to ground. Nothing doing. Okay, so we're dead. Now why would we be dead? There's only two possibilities. It either goes to ground or it's energized by the positive terminal of the battery. If we can make the switch go down, then we'll just try both sides and see if we can't make it happen. So much of this work is again about improvising because things don't ever work out the way you think they're going to. Nothing there either. Huh. What is going on? So the other alternative is not so bad either. Let's take their system, let's take their wiring system out of the equation. And let's try to jump it direct. So we're going to try to hook to the back of the solenoid. This is where the power goes for the, it's actually not on the solenoid, it's actually on the starter motor. I don't know what kind of starter this is, but not doing us any favors today. Pause. Negative. Let's see if we get anything here. Is that a noise? I'm laughing. Is my battery dead? It's right on the edge. Oh, it says it's dead, boys. So it could be that this starter is just tired or is the wrong one and we're not going to succeed. But given all the battery troubles, I went and picked up a new battery. So I'm eliminating one problem out of the equation. So we're going to put this thing back on, hook it back up, and see if we can't get this thing to turn over on a consistent basis and try to get it started. If it doesn't work, I'm going to take this starter off and order a correct Mule starter, which are available. They're about 150 or 175 bucks, but it's going to need a good starter anyway, unless I want to put it back on a pull start, which I'm not looking forward to at this point. So, but let's see if it'll turn over now. The way this starter works is that the solenoid has to be powered up in order to drive the gear in, and I'm not sure which and why it's working. I'm not sure which one I'm touching, but anyway, I've got to have that powered up. So what I'm going to do is make a jumper wire and get a 6-foot wire and put it over on the positive so we can hook it up, and it'll keep that thing engaged, and then the thing should turn over. And then we can put gas in it and see if it'll fire up. That sounds a lot fresher than the other one did. All right, so that's what we were looking for. So let me take the solenoid off. So that does not sound like something that's got any issues. So we're going to hook this back up, put the solenoid back on it, and see if we can't get this thing to turn over and choke and run. Ignition is on. Not too long. All right, stop. That's a long time to run a starter. I'm going to turn this on one more time, and if that doesn't, if it doesn't fire, we're going to do some work here on the magneto. Okay, nothing. So let me take this solenoid off so we don't burn that thing up. We like the power though. I like that thing turning over, so that gives me hope. So next question is, do we have spark? We're going to take off this spark plug again
on this side, and we're gonna see if we have spark. My guess is we probably won't. The reason for that is the magneto. Okay, so that feels pretty good. Now, what we're gonna do, we should see a nice spark here. I'm gonna have to leave that thing. So I'm gonna jump over, since this is sort of a semi one-man operation. I'm gonna get this thing cranking, and then I'm gonna run back over here and see if we have spark. We start this thing up and we go. Now, over here, no spark. We don't totally trust that switch, but let's pop the magneto off and see if we can get spark out of this thing. Magneto is the same idea as a distributor, except it's got a built-in coil, if you will. It creates its own spark. So they're used in airplanes so that if the electrical system fails, the motor keeps running. And again, this is primarily airplane technology, so it's got points inside of it. We're gonna pop it off, and the chances are the points are just corroded a little bit. Okay, so that's all you do. The timing you adjust by moving this thing, and we'll talk about that in a second too. This is a real contraption right here. This is supposed to come off. So this thing, you gotta wiggle it out of the way here. All we're doing here, taking the cover off, we're gonna see the points inside. There is, you see, this is probably why. Those are, you can see there's, I don't know if you can see in there, it's black in there. Everything looks fine inside. It just needs to be cleaned, so you don't want any oil in there. If you just pull that through a couple times on both sides. And we also might not have a good ground. This is Magneto's work. The power switch, the ignition switch on the front is grounding out this magneto. That's what this needs to be to ground. So the thing, I'm gonna put this back on and see if we get spark. If I don't, I'm probably gonna run another temporary wire to ground and make sure that doesn't give me spark. And then if that doesn't give me spark, then I might do one last little thing, which is take a little copper and stick a little piece of copper wire inside of the end of the spark plug holder and make sure that we got plenty of contact there. And that probably would be my last guess, and at which point I'm gonna say, Uncle, it beat me, the mule beat me today, and we'll keep filming. We'll get some new parts and we'll keep filming, but let's see where we go here. So if you look inside of here, usually these things are marked clearly with a nice little mark, but this one looks like it's just got that paint on it. There's the timing mark right here. So we've got to put this in such a way that it matches up. So we are not going to tighten this up super tight because we're going to want to be able to move it and see if we can get this thing to fire. See the spark? We got spark now. So let's do this again. Click. All right, so we have signs of life. That's good news. It's firing a little bit. Now, again, I think the spark is very weak. I think it's primarily because those spark plug wires leave a lot to be desired. The carburetor also, though, The guy put a new carburetor on, so for all I know, I don't know what he did when he did that. All right, let's do it one more time. Take the photo. Hey, hey. That was a running mule. Let's try this one more time. I think we got this thing licked. All right, guys, so I think that is a wrap. We got most of the goals accomplished. We got this thing running again. It's not running reliably, and obviously the electrical system is goofy, and the starting system's not working correctly. So anyway, but it does run, so I hope that I didn't end up with too bad of a purchase, buying something sort of sight unseen, just using pictures. I think this thing's gonna probably be fine. But the next video, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna eliminate some of these problems. So I'm gonna rewire this. It's not a particularly interesting thing to do, but we're gonna run new wires everywhere so that the starter's got a good wire and the solenoid's got a good wire, and that I understand we can just put a battery in here and turn it over. I'm also going to order some new points, and I'm going to order new spark plug wires so that we have good spark, because I think that's part of the reason why it's not running great. And I'm also going to clean out the fuel tank so that we can rely on the fuel tank proper, and we'll get this thing plumbed back up. And so next video, we will get it running smoothly and maybe adjust the timing a little bit and drive it around and see what else is wrong with it, if anything. And then I think from there, I can make a good plan for what I'm going to do with this thing, whether I'm going to just do a cosmetic paint job or even just clean up the few things that I need to clean up and sell it as a project to somebody else now that it's been de-risked and we know it runs and drives. So as always, appreciate you tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave us comments if you want to see anything, or if you've got any questions or suggestions or things that you think we can do better. I'm always open to suggestions. So as I like to say, keep your corners square, get out in your shop and make something. Thanks.